Hello and welcome to I Smoke New York. I'm Ben Gilbert, back again with my co-host Dr. Dankenstein to my left, and then further to his left, a surprise guest, somebody new, our first ever interview episode. This is Damian Fagon, the Chief Equity Officer of the Office of Cannabis Management, the New York Office of Cannabis Management.
New York State Office of Cannabis Management.
Which maybe is more importantly known as the office that makes sure that we can all actually like legally grow and sell weed and stuff, right? Like the regulatory body,
Yes.
if you will.
Regular.
Applause.
Yes.
Don't do that. Boo this man.
No, but for real, I've been waiting for this moment for a really long time. And before any of that, I appreciate, you coming out here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really cool.
I'll always do these conversations, man. It's important to get the right information out there.
Yes, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for being our first guest and for showing up to put up with our nonsense this morning. So with that said, let's jump right in to this some nonsense. Let's start, I think, really simply with some context, just like who you are, your background, how you guys met. Let's maybe start there. How did you two meet?
Damian met?
Yeah.
Okay, graphical story.
No, I remember it, bro. Well, didn't we met because you were at working Canny, right? I remember an Instagram post.
Yep.
What's Canny?
NYC GPA back then, New York State Cannabis Growers and Processors Association.
The New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association, which is now the Cannabis Association of New York. So the NYC PGA versus Canny now, right? Just the same group though, right? It's a lobby group?
Yes.
Right.
And
It's a 501c6. It's like a nonprofit lobbying organization, yeah.
Okay. So you guys met there. How'd you,
Well,
you
they
weren't
were
part
lobbying,
of that though, right?
so they were lobbying for the hemp farmers to get licenses. And me, as an outside person on Instagram who was growing weed and like knew all these weed growers, I was like, yo, that's fucking crazy. You know what I mean? So I messaged on the post. I was like, yo, that shit's fucking crazy. And Damian's like, what the fuck's your problem, bro? He's like, yo, so Damian's like, quick. And honestly, I have a lot of respect for you because of this. Is like, I don't know, a lot of these people you can't have a conversation with because they don't want to have it out or they seem sneaky, but like, he wants to talk, and like, I think that's how we first started the conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
That's crazy.
That's honestly a reflection of how I've like kind of always looked at cannabis like with curiosity.
Right.
And I think that there's a lot of people, especially who are like in the legal market and, supposedly kind of in charge of big businesses and stuff. They speak with such authority about cannabis, like they don't seem curious. Like there's a lot of stuff you don't know. There's a lot of stuff about the culture and the people who've been growing it and selling it that you don't know. And so when I see like in the comments, like this emotional reaction from a New Yorker who's like been growing weed, like, I'm like, oh, what's this guy about? Like, what is his problem? What does he want? And, if you're thinking about my background, I mean, it's more of like, I was in grad school when I first started looking at cannabis, studying economics here in New York. And I always looked at cannabis as like kind of like a grad school project. Like I want to figure it out. I want to understand the supply chain. I want to understand where it's headed. I want to understand how to use it to benefit communities that deserve a chance to build wealth. And so it's that curiosity, that openness to like also be wrong. And then in my wrongness, like find a better solution. You know what I mean? Like, and
that's amazing.
Yeah, no, but there's a lot of people in cannabis because it's such I don't know. It's like there's a lot of uncertainty about where this is headed.
Sure.
And because there's so much uncertainty, people try to project certainty into it. Like, I know what the right thing to do is.
Right.
And it's like, no, you don't. No one does because no one's done the right thing yet.
Right. We're at zero, basically.
Exactly.
It's not even federally legal yet.
Yeah.
And too many of the wrong people are trying to say they know how to do it the right way. And they're proceeding because the right people don't have the opportunity or don't have the power. And it's like, that's why. So I got a question too. When you were getting into cannabis, did you look at it as like a new industry that you were going to be able to prove a concept of like having, being able to empower?
Yeah. So that's really interesting because I started looking at cannabis. I was in a class at Columbia Business School. And so my family has a big farm in Jamaica. It's a citrus farm. And so it's gone bankrupt a couple times now because we can't export oranges off the island. There are all these policies, import-export policies in Europe and the United States that prevents us from making money on the farm by exporting. And I wanted to understand, like, find a commodity crop that I could bring back to my family farm in Jamaica. And so it was 2015 at that point, and I love smoking weed. And states on the East Coast were starting to legalize hemp. And so that's when I started looking at hemp and CBD. I didn't want to move out west. Not a big fan. And so I wanted to stay on the East Coast. And the only way to like be in cannabis on the East Coast 2015 to 2018, 19 was really through hemp and CBD. And so that's how it started. It was like I was into agriculture and economic development. Cannabis is going to be one of the next $100 billion agricultural commodities globally within the next 20 years. And so that's why I picked it.
Do you think hemp legalization is a conspiracy for federal legalization in the future?
I mean, I do think people, I mean, it usually goes like this: hemp, industrial hemp, CBD, medical cannabis, adult use cannabis.
Right.
Like that is the trajectory, because it just opens up people who are kind of closed off from the plant.
Right.
They start to see like, hey, farmers are growing this. Hey, maybe it's not so bad. I don't like the smell, but maybe we should do medical because these cancer patients need it. So like that's the progression.
Right.
Some states take longer than others. The East Coast has taken a lot longer than others.
Definitely, yes.
Which is bizarre. I mean, like when I started looking at hemp, I was going out to Colorado because I had a bunch of buddies out there in the industry, and just, get an Airbnb and just like meeting with growers and stuff out there. And they were just like, this is like 2016, 2017. They were just so far ahead. Oh, like people were still getting locked up every day on the East Coast, and these guys were just like freely growing hundreds of thousands of plants. I'm like, yo, what the hell? It's the same country? Yeah,
that's
it was wild.
Crazy, right?
So fast forwarding to 2021, right? That's like 5+ years later when we get the MRTA here, when we get legalization here. You were not part of any regulatory body out of the gate. You were.
I was selling
doing the Dankenstein thing.
No, I was, allegedly.
And
I was still masked at that point. I think when we met, I don't think did I have my face out yet? I think I was wearing like these weird masks and shit. Yeah.
Yeah, you're all weirding me out.
I was weirding
First
you out.
Kolektor is the same thing. I'm like, brother, take that off.
Brother,
we're free.
And actually, you were the one who linked me and Kolektor together.
Yeah,
really?
Because my Kolektor origin story is also fascinating because I was moderating a panel in Harlem at my buddy's at Joe's Barbershop up in Harlem, and it was a panel. It was after the MRTA was signed. I think it was the summer of 2021. I was a hemp farmer, and so we were just talking about cannabis cultivation, the future of cannabis cultivation in New York, and I'd never heard of the Kolektor or met the Kolektor, so I was interviewing him as part of the panel, and the aspect of it that like still blows me away to this day is that like hearing him talk about growing weed, I was like, I'm never growing weed.
Yo, right?
I'm done growing weed. Like the passion and like the skill set, like the way he talked about growing weed. I was like, bro, I was just putting seedlings on the field. Like, I was doing some soil analysis, but not all that. And it was just like, oh man, like if this industry is going to work, it's going to need to have people who take the growing aspect of it that seriously. Yeah. Not people who are just like, yo, to be honest, like there was another element of me picking cannabis. I got student loans. I cannot pay off student loans growing carrots in upstate New York.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
There was a lot of energy back then around hemp and cannabis and, making some cash. And I thought I could get out of this student loan trap I caught myself in through the plant. But people who are just in it for the money in a lot of ways, like they're not necessarily going to be the best growers. They're not going to be the best sellers. So yeah, meeting the Kolektor, meeting Dank, seeing people who are super passionate about the plant, like
oh man, it runs through the blood of these people.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like literally,
it's not a game,
right? Like when you think of like, and I think Kolektor said it before, it's like there isn't a different path for motherfuckers like us. Like it's like this is the only thing a lot of people know. So I don't know.
I think about that sometimes with Cali, with NorCal, because I've been out there, I've seen the growers out there, and there's just like thousands of small cannabis farms out there going under that have been going under for a long time.
Yep.
They're still doing their growing thing though. You know what I mean? Like they literally tell the press like, we don't know what else to do.
Right.
Like I'm in the middle of Northern California in the forest, bro. Like I grow weed.
Yeah, right.
And so there's an element to all this where it's like they built up this incredible talent, incredible skill at growing this amazing plant. And here comes legalization, and we're supposed to just like, forget you guys. We got these other group of people who also want to grow. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't make any sense.
And it won't work. I don't think it will. I don't think it'll fully work.
I mean, the scary thing is, and I don't mean to freak people out, it could work.
Do you think? I was just going to ask you,
it could work. Yeah, I do think it could work. But I don't want it to work.
Well,
so that's the thing. It's like, I definitely think that eventually, and this is the thing, it's like a lot of talented growers are also employees. Can also be employees. They can also show bigger corporations how to grow the weed.
Right.
They can also give them their legacy strains that they've had for years.
I don't know that I agree with that, actually.
This
It's
is-
something
it is
that I've run
happening.
into. It does happen. It's
Ah.
but it's like aberrations where it happens. Because more often than not, I find that there's this huge cultural disconnect, right? Like when you run into that corporate side, that there is an expectation that the grower will do everything for them and take like 10% maybe. And on the other side, there's this expectation that there's passion and interest from the corporate side, and there isn't often. It's just like about the bottom line.
Yes.
And so you get that division
You would be
between
surprised how
passion.
passionate people are about the bottom line, though.
Of course, of course. And they need to be. I don't mean to say that. Yeah.
No,
Absolutely.
but like that's the thing. It's like that's also an energy in America. Like, yeah, passionate about. I love cannabis. I love plant. Like making money in America. That's something. When you run up against that,
Sure.
it's like that's a tsunami.
Yo.
Yeah.
It's like,
Most
as a
definitely.
regulator now of cannabis, seeing it from the vantage point of a regulator, seeing that greed and that drive to make money, that desperation in some people, especially because there's not a lot of wealth generating opportunities in this country. And the second one comes along, it's a mad scramble.
Definitely.
As you saw what happened to tech in the late 90s, early 2000s, people became millionaires and billionaires, and a lot of people are projecting all that onto cannabis. And yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's a force that could wash a lot of stuff away.
Yeah.
So you
Definitely.
think that a regulated market could eventually sweep out just the legacy market entirely?
And so this is what I think.
That sounds like a challenge.
Well, no. I'm not here to declare war. I'm not here to.
I'm joking.
I'm saying that people should be worried about that.
Yeah.
It is. What do you think? Gentrification doesn't work?
Right.
Like it happens in every industry. It happened in hip hop. It happened in alcohol. It happened in the numbers game. A lot of people in New York know about the lottery and the numbers game. Black communities in New York were doing that for decades before the lottery became a thing.
God, no way. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
That's crazy. Another thing white people done stole from. Huh? Jesus Christ.
But there's elements of this where it's just like there is a playbook here for a regulated, legalized market to capture what was long in the illicit, unregulated market.
Well, it would need to be a lot more competitive, right? Like this is something
Yes.
that you and I complain about a lot, is the quality of the product in the market and there being a lack of high enough quality, at least for the price, right? It's that the prices are equivalent with the black market or the unlicensed market, or as I like to call it, the existing market. And that should not be. Like if you're paying $60 an eighth plus tax plus maybe a debit card charge for outdoor or greenhouse, that seems like unrealistic with the
thing.
market.
That I think the true cost of the unregulated market and the weed that's grown is not representative of like the true cost of growing that plant in a lot of ways. They don't have to pay health insurance to their employees. They don't have to build bathrooms for their employees. They don't have to pay taxes. There are all these elements of the unregulated market where they're actually hiding a lot of the costs.
Well, even compared it to other markets, legal markets, regulated markets.
I mean,
our market is
markets,
currently.
there's some legal markets that have prices competitive with the illegal market, like Oregon does.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Even
they have a competitive market.
If you're looking at a $60 eighth in California on the legal market, it's very different than what you're getting here for $60 in the legal market.
Yeah, well, there's 6 years old.
And of
it's
course,
10
of
years
course.
old.
There's a huge difference. I don't mean to say that, but markets
no,
are
you're
markets,
right.
right?
You
Like
absolutely are
and
right.
A lot of the product that you see in stores here, unlicensed stores, is that product, right? It's the stuff from other regulated markets. It's not just like somebody not paying their employees' health insurance or whatever. It's a company who is paying health insurance and has a regulated and maybe has licenses. And
so
else
what
too.
there's legal weed that's legally manufactured and grown that is like, and I'll tell a story of my first encounter with this was in Mendocino County. I was out there like 2018, and I visited a legal grow. I had some buddies who had a nursery out there. Nursery business in California was fascinating to watch. I loved that. It was like so cool. They were making money hand over fist. But I saw one of these big behemoth outdoor grows in Cali, and the guy who owned the place was taking me around. He did probably the coolest thing I've ever seen, where he like opened the door to a room and there were just like 5 what looked like Berkeley students just rolling blunts. And he's like, "Give me that!" And then he like closed the door, like, "Get back to work." Like, what? He just got college students in there rolling blunts.
Damn.
But then he showed me around his hoop houses, and he started talking about like, "Well, see, this is metric. This is how we do the blah blah blah." And so sometimes, if I I will report that greenhouse as I lost all the plants to mold.
Yep.
And
Oh, right.
the regulators will send an email like, please destroy the plants.
Right,
It's just like,
Yep.
and then they end up in New York.
Yep.
And so like, that is,
I would say like the majority of the products in stores here is probably that. Right?
yeah, for sure. And, but at the end of the day, it's because, they can't make enough money the regulated way to
Right.
keep themselves in business. So that becomes almost a necessity. And then it's a domino effect. If one grow starts doing it, I got to start doing it to compete with that. It unravels very quickly.
Yes.
And that puts you in a hard spot too, as being like, because you're like the chief of equity. And from my understanding, like, isn't that a piece of equity would be like empowering those?
Yeah.
Or like, it would be making sure that those people that don't have that opportunity are successful whatever way they can against those big behemoth places, right? So
Yeah.
if they have to commit, if they have to go behind the regulations or rules to do that, isn't that,
Well, so there's this amazing paper that I made my whole team read. It was written by this like business school professor in like Montana. It went right under the radar, but it was like incentivized deviance or something like that, or cultivating deviance, I think is the name of the paper. Read that paper if you can. But it's like how in the cannabis industry, if you're a business operator that's regulated, you're already breaking federal law. All right. So like maybe you're not paying there are big MSOs who do not pay their federal income tax or their federal type business tax. Maybe, there's this regulation that's preventing you to do this one thing that will make you profitable. So maybe I'll just like kind of ignore that regulation. So there's like ways that the regulations keep you from being profitable. So it kind of cultivates and incentivizes them to deviate, to break the law, to break the regulations, just to survive. And once you start breaking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it devolves very quickly, which is tricky in cannabis when you have regulated businesses competing with people who aren't paying taxes and have a lot more free reign to just ship it out of state, to get a bigger price out of state and all this other stuff. And so like in order to stay alive, to keep your maybe 100-year-old Northern California farm alive, you got to start doing that.
Sure.
It's unfortunate, but I do think California's. And I actually just, I've met a lot of the regulators in California. I think California paid a huge price for going first. And they learned a lot of hard lessons. They're still learning a lot of hard lessons, but they'll get it together eventually. But one of the hardest lessons that we took from what happened there is license stacking. It is these huge grows that are like 50 acres of weed, industrial agriculture in California kind of dominating the cultivation space. And if you're a small farm in Humboldt County, you cannot compete with the scale. You are priced out of the market. Your only choice is to go to New York. And that is just that's a sentence in regulations that allowed for those licenses to be stacked. And so, that there are mistakes that they made that a lot of states can learn from.
So to go back to equity real quick, because you mentioned that very briefly. And I know something we wanted to do was, just kind of define that for everybody, right? Because there's a lot of different, I think people interpret it a lot of different ways. Frankly, I think it's an interpretable concept. So,
and if I can add to that really quick, so like from my geological location in the world and like my life that I've lived so far, like shout out Brandy Hasner. She's the one who defined and told me what equity was like 2 years ago. And I had, totally no idea. I thought that it was the exact same meaning as equality. I thought equity and equality are the same thing. And I think there's a lot of people that have lived that same kind of life that I have that almost have like a fear of the words because they have a lack of understanding of what it actually is. And so I'm assuming that you have probably like a good description of it.
Well, yeah, I'll use an example of the card program as an equity program. What we know about the folks we licensed in card and what we know about the retail dispensary license itself is that there is a significant advantage to going first, to getting the best foot trafficked areas. Medical operators that transition to adult use usually get this on the East Coast. In order to make the playing field level, we give them a year head start to find those locations. The people who got arrested, the people identified in the MRTA as worthy of extra priority in how we incorporate them into the market. So give them an advantage, give them this position that puts them on an equal playing field with the people who have more capital, more resources, probably just, a better ability to pull this off. That makes it, equitable.
Now, see, but I fundamentally just slightly disagree with that just because I've met so many people that were in prison with me and that they didn't need equity. They were out, I don't know, they were getting money. You know what I mean? So it's like, just because they had that, does that really necessarily mean that they are somebody that needs that help?
No,
You know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
no. It's not necessarily meaning, but it is an acknowledgement of disparities.
Right.
It's just an
Yeah,
acknowledgement of disparity. And when we write rules that advantage small businesses, because small businesses are going to have a tough time competing with big businesses, and so we create equitable regulations that level the playing field. In a lot of ways, I think the frustration in New York with like everyone watching all these card licensees kind of open up stores, like I haven't been able to apply yet. Like I get the frustration. That is equity. Like equity is waiting your turn. Equity is also like equity is inconvenient for a lot of people who have a lot of advantages in life.
But and it should be like, I mean, and this is from my ignorant understanding, but like, and it should be like stressful for the rich motherfuckers the most, right? like the idea is to like pin us to get from them to give to us.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, so if you get a dispensary license in New York early, it does give you an advantage in raising money. A lot of our card licensees are Black and brown. They have these records. They come from these communities. In a competitive market where everyone's got retail dispensaries, you know, investors aren't necessarily looking their way in a lot of ways. They're looking at the guy who's got a background in finance and banking because they know they'll manage, you know, they'll have these assumptions about how they'll do. And so, but if you let the folks go who are, you know, starting, you know, from first base as opposed to third base, go first, the investors are really kind of, in a lot of ways, incentivized to look at them because they can get these premium locations. And so,
and shout out the card program for that, because I think it did do that. And I know a ton of people that were in the program that there is no way they would ever be in the position if they weren't. And I also know people that I think probably shouldn't have got in, but you know, you can't do everything. You know, what are you gonna do?
Well, this is also a thing. Like, the governor of Minnesota said something recently because he was being criticized for this this free lunch program at all public schools in Minnesota. Big Democrat. Minnesota's been doing a lot of incredible progressive policy over the last year. But he was basically being criticized, but like now there's gonna be rich kids who get free lunch at public school. I don't want to pay for rich kids to get public school. And his point was just like, yo, feed kids.
Right.
Yo, let them all eat for free.
Yeah.
Like, what does it matter? Like, there's this testing, like, well, the card program, like some of these guys didn't, you know, deserve that. And some of these guys deserve. Help people. You know what I mean? Like help people who deserve to be helped.
Well, I think that actually that's a great example, though, something there's a difference between those two pretty conceptually, right? Like one of those examples is give everybody free lunch regardless, which would, the equivalent I think here would be open up the licensing for everybody rather than it just being opening up licensing for some people earlier than others, which I don't mean to say is necessarily a bad solution to trying to implement equity. Well, it's just different approaches.
I think that in the case that I'm referring to, in card, there are people who got card licenses who are already millionaires. You know what I mean? Like who are already very wealthy. There are people in card who in some cases have been homeless in the last 5 years. So the fact that this very wealthy person was in the program too does not invalidate the program. Because you know what I mean? That's kind of the point here.
Agreed.
Like, but yeah. Equity.
So I know to me, like on its basis level, equity to me is just like the concept of fairness, right? It's like about bringing like balance and fairness to a system or whatever it might be. So like that at its baseline is like something that like is very interpretable, right? It's something that it means different things to different people because of their context in the world, and why wouldn't it? And so it to that extent, though, I think that something Dankenstein and I have talked about a lot is the concept of believing in the systems that we have to fix those problems, right? Like I know something that we talk about a lot is the systems that we have are the reasons that we have a lot of these problems. So how could we possibly depend on them to fix those problems?
Yeah.
And that's something that I struggle with a lot with, you know, like I reached out to you for the Growers Cup very early on, largely as a measure of like making sure everybody was safe, right? And it wasn't because I was like excited to talk to the government. I don't mean that to be rude, but like it's not that I'm happy to talk to you, human being, Damian, but like the government is not somebody I'm necessarily excited to reach out to because I know that there'll be all sorts of like nonsense involved usually as a result.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. I have worked for the government before. I worked for the federal government for a few years, but I've been in and out of the government for a long time. I think, and this is something that I think a lot of younger people need to get accustomed to. There is really only one organization that can make this a better country for, you know, marginalized communities, and just make it a better place to live and raise families and smoke weed and get a living wage. There's only one organization, one entity that is the key to unlocking all of that for all citizens, and that is the government. It's always been the government since FDR and the New Deal. Like, and, you know, the government has been so cruel to its people for so long in the last, you know, 4 decades, especially like millennials. As long as we've been alive, the government has been doing bad things to us. You know? But at a certain point, it does get to a point where it's like, all right, guys, millennials are now the biggest voting bloc. We're adults. We have kids. Like,
I mean, but
let's.
I'm a millennial. I have, over my lifetime as a person who could vote, have become less inclined to vote.
Yeah, that's
I've been
unfortunate. Because you know who's
disincentivized
become
to vote.
more inclined to vote? Corporations.
Of course.
And
Of
so
course.
the country's going to get worse.
I understand that that's the situation, but
Yeah.
like it's something that it's very hard over time to continue to feel like it's worth doing something, especially in New York where you're like, all right, my vote means what kind of thing, right?
Well, that's why New York City has a 17% voter turnout. And that 17% voter turnout, you know, those people wrote the MRTA. They actually they're more in charge of regulating the plant that you love and have been around your whole life than you guys are. And that's because, you know, it's not necessarily, we can barely call ourselves a democracy with voter turnout rates like that. And so what Chris always talks about in the office, you know, is doing government differently. And, you know, he brings on a lot of people that who have a lot of like hope for what government could be, not what it currently is. And in a lot of ways, what I've been seeing out there with our card licensees, with folks in the CCTM program is like, yo, is the government trying to help me right now? Is the government trying to give me an opportunity right now? I'm like, yes, that's what the government's supposed to do.
But as people that have felt betrayed by that, how do you know it's like how do you know they're not trying to get that to take advantage of you? Like, that's how I feel. You're giving the government the opportunity to define who equity, you know?
Yeah.
And it's scary when they're traditionally and historically the motherfuckers that made the problems.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And also personally, real quick, what do you do about somebody like me who I don't know the difference between a Republican or a Democrat? I only have just realized this stuff recently. So it's like when you're encouraging someone like me to vote, I've never voted once in my life. I have 2 felonies, a lot of crime history. I know a lot of educational like book type shit. What do? I don't know what to do.
Yeah,
I mean, it's my fault because I wasn't educated by the country and like
no.
addict.
This is totally fair.
Yeah.
This is totally fair because a lot of you know, there's a lot of underinvestment in communities to ensure that they aren't politically active. I think in this country, and to ensure that they are jaded and cynical and don't vote. But if you look at what communities, you know. They're clean. They have good infrastructure. Suburbs, the Upper East Side where I live, like people who are active politically, who politicians know they have to respond to when they have issues. If communities aren't actually holding their representatives accountable because they don't trust them or they don't believe in them, they're just going to keep doing whatever the hell they want to do to whoever is actually voting, which is, you know, in New York, I feel like a lot of like if someone running for office in New York City like gets like a retirement apartment building to like go in for them, they could swing a whole election like because of how many people vote.
That's crazy.
But yeah, no, you're totally right. I think that there is definitely like a lot of underinvestment in just like, you know, empowering people to understand that they are the ones who create all of this through action, through voting, through holding their representatives accountable.
And I guess maybe there was so much lobbying to like I guess I'm kind of understanding as we talk, like to keep people from not knowing that. Like, I guess like our whole people, like made it seem like we didn't have any power among.
Yeah, and so I'll never forget going to Brownsville. I never thought
voting mattered, yeah.
I remember going to Brownsville houses last December to do a community meeting with my team to just like talk cannabis with those folks and see what they wanted to happen with the industry. And we're talking like people who live in the Brownsville projects like their whole lives, they're like 60-year-old Black men, were telling us that they had never had state or city government come to them with an economic opportunity before in their 60 years in Brooklyn.
That's crazy, bro.
They've had people come about like gun prevention violence, like, you know, like transportation issues, but nothing about like, hey, do you guys know about, do you guys want to start a small business? Do you guys want access to this new $1 billion legal? So what I say is that like, by going to that community and telling them about this opportunity and empowering them to like access this information and access us as regulators, they're like, oh shit, the government is supposed to be doing this for me. They've always been supposed to be doing this. There's a democratizing element to all this where people are like, wait a second, who is my assembly person? Who is my city council member? Who is my state representative? And they start asking questions just like, oh, wait, I can get more involved in this. Wait, this guy works for the government. He's listening to me about this. There's a lot of people who've always had that relationship with their local representative. And so they feel empowered and entitled in a lot of ways to push for that stuff. But a lot of communities have just been neglected. And so once they start seeing us out there, like, Chris always says, doing government differently, there is an empowering element to some of that.
So to that end, if somebody were to, say, have criticisms about the way the MRTA was written or how the OCM is enacting the MRTA, how could they best do something about that?
Yeah, we just had a year of public comment.
Beyond submitting a public comment into the ether.
Hey, we
and then
incorporated
hoping for
a
the
lot
best.
of public comments. I mean, one of the reasons the regs took so long is we got 4,000 public comments. We had to legally read every single one of them and respond. And there are template responses to them. Like, we didn't make changes, but we could only write that like confidently if we read the comment. You know what I mean? Like if we read the comment and said like, oh, okay, we can't do that. But what I'll say about that is that I am always listening to people in the community about ideas about all this. I think what sometimes frustrates them is that there are these, maybe they don't fully understand the legal constructs of the MRTA. Like, no, we can't do that. We can't let farmers go directly because we have this 2-tier market. So there's some element of just like, they're frustrated because they think they have this great idea, but it actually doesn't work with the way the law is written.
Sure.
And the law is a very hard thing to change. I mean, the MRTA is flawed. It's the best in the country, but there are flaws in it. But to get the support necessary in Albany to make changes to it is a lot. It's a political lift.
Right.
And so that is the document we have in a lot of ways. And so people really need to understand that document. I understand what that document entitles you to, understand what it could force OCM to do. Because if you come to us and you be like, hey, this part of the MRTA says you guys should be doing this and you're not, that's huge.
How would somebody do that though, right? Like you just said, like how would they come to you?
I don't want to tell people how to do that.
I mean, that's important.
No, you're right.
You shouldn't have to know a person to get access,
you
right?
shouldn't.
It should just be access.
There are definitely channels and I think, put it this way, like everything that does get emailed to us gets read by someone. And if there's thoughtful ideas about how we could be doing something different or how like on-site consumption could work, it's really important for people to like look at the current regs, look at the law, say like, all right, this is what I suggest you do. Write it this way, say this, do this, and then it will lead to this kind of benefit to small business. You know what I mean? Like say what the problem is, say what the solution they're proposing is, like the policy solution. You don't have to be like perfect at describing it. And then say like, how this would like benefit what the goals of, like link it back to the goals of the MRTA.
Sure.
Everything we do, we have to be able to legally point to the statute, to the cannabis law, and be like, it tells us to support small business. It tells us to give extra priority to people who got arrested. It tells us to do this, that, and the other. Because if we start doing stuff that isn't in the MRTA, it's lawsuits.
Right.
And so you really have to like understand what the MRTA is mandating the office to do, and then suggest how we could be doing it, how we could be meeting those goals differently. And that primarily would be done over email. And so, yeah, there's a lot of emails out there to send to, but I get forwarded stuff that gets sent to our primary inbox all the time. If you address it to Chris or I or John Kagia, who's director of policy, who like, honestly, like John Kagia, brilliant man, ideas are often vetted by him because he's been doing cannabis policy for a long time. But yeah, if there's ideas like that are addressed to us in our inbox and they're, grounded in, and people took the time, you could tell they took the time to suggest something, like, we'll definitely read it.
Great. Okay. So it's 2024, March almost 2024. So we're about 3 years into legalization.
Oh yeah. The 3 anniversary is coming up.
Just about.
Hey.
Mm-hmm.
And that puts us in a moment to reflect, to talk about those 3 years and look at where we are right now. So like, 3 years ago, I guess where would you have envisioned we would be by now? And if anything was different or better, worse?
Oh my God, 3 years ago, man. 3 years ago, I was a hemp farmer. No, That was 4 years ago. I'm getting old, y'all. I was teaching at Medgar. I think I was at Medgar Evers by then, but I was also at this nonprofit in the South Bronx when the MRTA was signed. And to be honest, like I wasn't as tapped into like what was happening with the MRTA and the lead up to that. Like I didn't realize the Senate and the Assembly were on the verge of passing cannabis legalization. I think a lot of people, in even hemp, were very surprised that it actually was signed by the former governor. And so I had very few expectations. I expected it to go a lot like Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts. I expected to have to fight for much less than we have right now.
Yep.
I expected to have to scream and yell and be like, no, the large publicly traded companies should not be selling weed before regular people. Like I felt like I was going to have to go to war. I was gearing up to like do organizing and advocacy around it. And I had been doing that sort of with Kenny and in the city and talking to people and building power, like community power. Like you have to have like stakeholders with influence to like change what they're going to do. But then they started doing things like naming Chris Alexander as the executive director. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Like I'd met him before. He's young and he's drug policy and a community organizer. And he's got all these like progressive roots in the community. And he's from these communities. So I was like, oh, this might be different. Hold up. And, you know, then I heard about CARD. I heard about the state committing $50 million right off the bat to build dispensaries of taxpayer money to build dispensaries for people who got arrested for weed. I'm like, well, hold up. Like, what's going on here? So immediately I was like, yo, this is a different thing. No state has ever done this. Like, no state has named someone like Chris to be the executive director. No state is upfront committed to something that is very hard and politically risky to do. So I already saw like, oh, they're really going for it. So I expected it to be, I honestly expected us to be right where we are. I expected it to be a year of lawsuits. I expected it to be a lot of infighting. And, you know, if you read the MRTA, it is a crazy complex document, like distressed farmers, service-able veterans, you know, women, like it's like 80% of the population is supposed to get priority. And you can see right off the bat when you read that thing, like, oh, it's about to be a fight. There's about to be a huge fight. And anyone who's familiar with cannabis market rollouts, I was talking to Al Harrington about this. We are not shocked. We were not shocked at what happened in New York. It's happened in every market. There's always a dogfight over this plant. I think we are out of it. I think
we're out of it over money. Really, it's really a dogfight over money.
Yeah, the plant leads to money.
Becomes secondary. You know. At
that point. It has cooled off a little bit, and I'm grateful for that. Like, it's definitely not the green rush like it used to be anymore. Like, you know, there's definitely a reality check for a lot of companies. But yeah, no, anticipating it to be a dogfight. I did not expect it to be, and people are going to laugh at this, as successful and impactful as it has been. I did not think,
Damian, wait a second.
Sure about that?
So the lawsuits, the injunctions, that stuff is part of doing cannabis. Like that stuff has happened in almost every social equity program in the country. So it's not like I saw that coming. So I anticipated that. But the fact that, you know, we're still here 3 years later, Vladimir Bautista's got a license to open a dispensary in Manhattan. Kaz is in the open in the Lower East Side. Like vegetable farmers grew the first legal products that were on the shelves. Housing Works made $30 million. Like there's a 26-year-old in Long Island who has the top selling dispensary in the country right now.
Who is it?
Strain Stars.
Strain Stars.
Oh yeah, that's easily one of the top 3 selling dispensaries in the country. They're up there with Planet 51 in Las Vegas. And there are things happening in the market that like I never would have anticipated us achieving. And the goal for me has never been, let's see how fast we can get to $1 billion. It was creating an industry that is going to outcompete and influence the entire trajectory of cannabis in the country and the world. It's a competitive market. It's going to take time to build. I think a lot of states rushed into it, did a lot of things that they deeply regret now, and have handed over their industries to people not even from their state. Like, it's just insane to me. And they're going to be getting hit on that for the next decade. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to be paying a huge political price for that in a lot of ways for many years to come. And we're about to launch this like small business supply chain with thousands of licensees. Like, you know, the fact that we've already licensed almost 1,000 people, 500 card, 300 growers, 40 processors, and are now licensing another 1,000 people Like other states start with 50 licenses. They start with 20 licenses. You know what I mean? Like we are building something.
So Sensei, and if we're gonna like, because I know you guys have really wanted to bring in like legacy and the real culture and all that, but like something that I think is one of the most impactful things and how like real recognizes real within that is that when something happens or if you do something wrong or something, you own up to it no matter what. You know what I mean? It's like a respect thing, and then and I've seen you do that. I've seen you do that personally. Besides the point, but within the OCM and within like the majority of political systems that I've seen in my experience, like that shit doesn't happen. Like I don't see people being accountable. And so do you think that there has been accountability within the OCM?
Oh man, you don't think we've taken enough punishment?
I want to see it. I want the tomato thing back.
Bro, I get it. We get it. We get it from everybody. And accountability, I mean, like, we are accountable. Like, we listen to the community. Like, when the farmers were really going through it, we weren't hiding from them. We weren't ignoring them. I was on the phone with farmers every day. When we were in the injunction, we were talking to card license. Like, we are a lot more involved with the criticism and the communities and the public feedback than any other regulatory cannabis agency in this country. We come out, Jason Salmon probably hit 50 different stops on his tours around the state, taking direct feedback from people, coming back to our office and being like, yo, they're wilding in Washington Heights. They're not happy. And like and but yeah, no, I think that there's been apologies too. There's been admissions of fault in like, the timing of some parts of the rollout. Some things are just out of our control. But I think, if we were to pretend like nothing bad happened and no mistakes were made, that's just gaslighting. It'll just piss people off. It'll make it worse. And so, no, we absolutely did. I mean, a lot of the things we've even innovated over the last year were acknowledgments of failure. The CGS program did not need to come out like that because we should have had more dispensaries open. We shouldn't have had to create the temporary delivery only solution for card. We should have had stores built out. Right. Like these things that we were doing were like us listening to the community and changing. When we expanded card from 150 people to 500 people, you know what I mean? Like we're listening to the community, we're changing. And so, no, I think that,
I guess to me, like, it's not even like for me in this other side of the world, it's not even so much for the change. You know what I mean? It's just like the admission. And, it's like, it's the respect thing. So it's not the cause and effect that happens. It's that knowing that the people, and actually I've had people criticize you for this before, saying that you were too emotional. But I thought that was more of like, that's what I want to see from somebody in there. I want to see somebody that's like genuinely talking to me upset about that shit or not, because everybody else has a smooth smile on their face and it's all bullshit, Yo,
how can you not be emotional when these farmers are telling you these stories, when card licensees are like, yo, I sunk everything into this business.
Some people are.
I mean, I think Chris has made a lot of. Again, I think people got to understand. I didn't apply for this job. Someone who is very important to me. Majority Leader Chris Stokes heard me on a radio interview in Harlem and asked me to do this job, and because I have so much respect for her and I liked Chris, I took it. But like that's why there's someone passionate in this role. Typically, these roles are filled by people who are just like, oh, they paid their dues. They should get the job.
Is Chris passionate the same way as you is?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to interview.
To be clear, also your role. We said your title, I think, Chief Equity Officer. Yeah. But what does that mean in terms of your job? What do you oversee at the OCM?
Yeah, I mean, so the role too it's in statute. And Chris, who wrote a lot of the bill, wrote the role. I think, in a lot of ways with probably him in mind back then, because he wrote this bill 2018, 2017. That's when he started writing it. But the role was meant to be hold the executive director and the agency accountable to the equity goals of the MRTA.
Okay.
So kind of like public advocate, like Jumaane Williams in the city, like someone who's representing the equity initiatives. Okay. And in a situation where an executive director might not be amenable to some equitable rollout, like that person is supposed to be a watchdog to ensure that. And, that my role has not turned out that way because Chris is so equity driven. Like we're just so aligned in what we want to do in the market that it's just more collaborative. It's not like, if you do that, I'm going to the press. You know what I mean? Like I'm working, Chris and I are working together to make sure that this thing works. And so what that looks like is, at the agency, I have a staff of 15 people, like lawyers, people who worked at ag and markets with farmers, public health people, some stoners, some people who know weed, and people who've worked in the industry in California. I've got 2 people who worked at big companies in California. And so I manage in the office a team of 15, and we manage, programs, the training programs, the Our Academy Accelerator. We write a lot of the regulations. We study the economics and the market dynamics to make sure small businesses can succeed. We do CCTM. We do the outreach to legacy. We manage a lot of the public-facing initiatives, the programs, and the trainings. And what's going to be coming in, the next few years is like we're also going to have a gigantic budget to build out incubators, to give out grants, to give out loans. And so my team will probably grow. Yeah.
And you oversee the micro license program as well, or no?
Micro business?
The micro business.
Yeah. So the micro business, and this is why reading the MRTA is important, boys and girls, because the micro business explicitly says it's intended for social and economic equity. The only licenses that say that delivery, micro business, and I think nursery, which is really interesting. And so, again, you don't have to. There aren't a lot of answers if you ask me, like, why is that? Like, they just wrote that. That's what was negotiated. Right. And so the micro business, as soon as I came in, I'm like, yo, let's dive into this micro business license. Let's write regs that make this thing like really amazing. And we talked to the guys at ESD, Empire State Development, who run the craft beer market in New York, which is a thriving market, growing market. Yeah. Like 100 years after alcohol prohibition, we have a growing craft beer market that is worth $5 to $10 billion, which is how big cannabis might be. And so we talked to them about, how they did that. How did you spin off all these small businesses upstate, generating all this economic impact, growing great beer that people take tours up to go around the winery, even wineries, go around the wineries and the craft breweries. And that's what the micro business license is. It's, a very flexible license where you can have retail or not. You can have retail and sell to other retailers. You can have on-site consumption. You can do delivery. You can have a nursery license in the law. It says that micro business can also do a nursery. So potentially sell clones and seedlings to home growers. Like, you have a ton of revenue generating opportunities, and it's intended for social and economic equity because they deserve that. They deserve this vertically integrated opportunity to build a brand. And if they want to grow bigger, you can transition up to a bigger grow, or stick with the micro. And so there's just all this room to maneuver there. And that's why, I really like it, especially for legacy growers.
Yeah.
And for social and economic equity. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like the most interesting license that's the reason I started a business in cannabis, was the micro business license seemed like the one that you could build a craft market.
Yep.
Like really dig in on a craft market. And speaking of craft markets, you should smoke some of this. This is the Allergen Ave. I think the Pheno, right? You said, Sensei? So what's the cross on that?
Is it a pink paper?
Yeah, it's a pink paper.
That's a pink paper. My God.
It's the Motor Breath OZK.
Motor Breath to OZK. It's from the Collector. It's doing the things.
Is it going this way?
It's a performance doink.
It's not going over here.
I'm at work, ladies and gentlemen. I'm on the taxpayer dollar. They're paying for you to be here right now. It's not smoke weed.
It's pretty delicious. I just wanted to give you a look. I know we're having it.
It smells beautiful,
stuff, but it felt like the right moment.
Well, no, I have a quick question though. So, and I probably should know this, but the OCM is to the state as what? Like, what is? Because like,
that's a good question. Yeah. I mean, what would you? The SEC is to the banking industry. I don't know. We're regulators, but so it's confusing because we're regulators who just we're supposed to be like an arm's length distance from the businesses we regulate. We're supposed to create the market, the regulations, the policies that dictate how people compete and how they build their businesses and get licenses. But we're also supposed to help people.
Right.
So there's this weird push and pull, where it's no, we have to be away from you. Here's a loan, here's training. You know what I mean? We're supposed to be involved, but not too involved. So yeah, we're like an economic development agency and neutral regulators at the same time.
Okay.
Oh. All right. You ready for some talk about criticisms? Let's talk criticisms.
Uh-oh.
Let's talk big OCM
We didn't already do that?
No, little.
Oh, look at the
tiny
time.
bit.
Look at the time.
Oh, my God. So one thing I wanted to circle back on, you talked about actually specifically earlier. You said one of the things you named as something that was a big plus in the last 3 years is enabling the market to start with folks like vegetable farmers, which I think on paper makes a lot of sense. When you're like, New York farmers are getting the chance to be the first to market in an agricultural industry. And that, I think, to most people makes a lot of sense. But then when you're talking about the cannabis industry, there's a lot more nuance to that, right? Like, it means that the products that you get in the stores are not going to be really competitive with stuff that's being grown like indoors by longtime high quality growers, like the stuff that I'm smoking right now.
It would have been if we let them do indoor.
I don't know that it would be necessarily.
There are
'cause they don't
guys
have
in the hemp program
experience.
that can grow fantastic weed.
Yes,
And
yes.
they would have, if we had given them indoor licenses, they would have grown fantastic weed. But they had to grow outdoors in a tough environment to grow outdoors, especially when you don't know what genetics yet are going to thrive
Sure.
in an outdoor, humid New York State and climate, especially when you don't even know what the growing season is going to look like. So they grew what they could. But this is something that I think a lot of folks need to get comfortable with, is like, we have a lot of environmental and sustainable goals that are like mandated that we accomplish.
Yes.
Like, there is a very strong environmental movement in New York State that does not want to see this giant sprawling new industry come that's using 2% of the power grid like Colorado. And so we had to start with outdoor grow. But yeah, I mean, like that's perfectly fair. That was something that no state's ever done before, where they just push the hemp farmers into the legal market.
Right.
I still think it was an incredible economic development initiative. I think some mistakes were made in understanding, well, how many farmers is that? Like,
Sure.
Because I wasn't on that list, because I grew 1 year in New York and I grew 1 year elsewhere. So you had to grow 2 years. None of us, even at Canny at the time, knew that would be 300 farms. I think like we were thinking 100.
Right.
Like, really.
Sure.
And that's because the farmers in New York, they don't even talk to each other in a lot of ways. They don't know each other. When people were growing hemp, they were doing it in their own little silos, like
Sure.
looking around. And that's how we just like destroyed the market, because I'm like, wait, that dude down the road is doing 100 acres of CBD? Like,
Sure.
And you find that at the end of this growing season, you're like, yo, I'm screwed. But yeah, that's kind of what the market was started with.
So I guess then, to that extent, like why not enable more licenses to roll out at the same time then, right? Like, why prioritize it for that?
Capacity.
Okay.
It was there was a desire, and I wasn't at the OCM when this happened, but I can speak to their intentions. There was a desire to kick the market off with a conditional program. Every state's done that. California did that. Get some people in early just to
Sure.
build up while we're hiring, because at the time, they're building an agency. They had like 20 staff probably when that hemp bill passed. And so let's get some market going. We have one growing season. Like, we're not gonna have any weed at the end of the year if we don't let them grow outdoors. There was no capacity to like, all right, well, let's also let these guys grow. Like, how are we gonna vet them? How are we gonna identify them? Who's gonna review their applications? You know what I mean? Like, this is all paperwork that it just wouldn't operationally work.
You didn't want to just hire Dank? I feel like that would be fine. He'd be like, I know that guy. It's fine.
Shout out
Bring 'em in.
our licensing team. They are like the hardest working people in our office. And, there's like 30 of them, and there's so much pressure on them all the time. Emails, people calling them constantly. Like, where's my license? What? It's just, they face all of that every day. And they're just regular New Yorkers who just like have a job in Albany, in some cases, and in the city. But yeah, there was just no ability to go beyond just the hemp farmers. The hemp farmers had to show us 2 pieces of paper. They grew this year. I grew this year. All right, go grow outdoors. Yeah. That's it.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't get easier than that. And that's why they did it that way.
Okay. All right.
And was some of the attention beyond that was so that they could put this outdoor product to sale and raise all this capital with a really low overhead?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like, we expected it to be pretty affordable to grow outdoors.
They're selling $60 outdoor ace.
Hey,
it's crazy.
There are people who wanted legal weed, and I mean, that's supply and demand. That's just it. You know what I mean? Like, they'll charge what they can get, and the retailers will charge what people are willing to pay for it. But yeah, the quality wasn't there. I remember a video you guys did immediately. You guys were outside Housing Works, like, trash. Like, that's rude, gentlemen. But this is the thing. This is the thing. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that like a lot of these other states weren't growing garbage their first year of legal market. It takes time, and I think a lot of consumers have come to expect that the flower will improve over time as we let more licensees in the market. Which is why I'm very excited to start issuing them next week at our board meeting.
Oh shoot,
That's what's up.
well, let's go.
Okay.
Who's getting the first one?
Up to licensing, I don't know.
All right. We got some clarifications. We've asked for community questions We submitted some solicitations for questions online. I filtered through them
You should
as
see
need
some of
be.
them.
Why are you an idiot?
That's very polite.
That was some
That's extremely
crazy
polite.
ones.
Why do I want to punch you in the face right now? Like, oh, right, oh.
But no, there were some good ones too. Do you have any? Yeah.
I've got one from you to start.
Oh yeah, let me get it. I wrote it.
Yeah, well, you told me it. So
right.
yeah, I wrote it.
Whoops.
And the question is, why was the micro license limitation changed to 220? You said it used to be unlimited? Or maybe it was higher than that? Maybe it was never higher than that.
No, it was always
It's just a
220.
clarification. It's always been 220?
You
Yeah,
know
it was
what?
220.
I think what I was talking about was in the beginning when we were all talking, when Candy was pushing for things and blah blah blah. There was a lot of talk of like having an unlimited amount of micros, and then it really. Do you think that's a possibility?
I want
in
to
New York
get to
have unlimited micros.
what you're hinting at is like a scenario like with the liquor authority where if you want a liquor license, you apply to get a liquor license and you just get one. What do you think would happen if we gave unlimited micros to everyone who wanted one tomorrow?
See, I don't know.
A lot of people would apply.
And
how many micros do you think would just be operational next year in New York?
I don't know.
10,000, 5,000?
How many of them will grow good weed? They're from the culture. They can
Right.
sit and have an interview.
Exactly.
You know, like
So what you're saying is a lot of people go bankrupt, right?
a lot of the Chad motherfuckers.
Yeah, but like
Yeah.
no one wants. And then what are the headlines going to say? What are our board meetings going to look like? Why'd you give so many people to do it? You know what I mean? Like the price for weed is this, and I can't make any money, and I lost my life savings, and my kid can't go to college. Like you will harm so many people with just like opening up that opportunity to everybody.
And from my limited perspective, and I'm sure it's unpopular, but from my community, fuck those dudes. You know what I mean? Like,
But no, you know,
but I know,
but
and I know it's not just
Couldn't
or
your
right.
people
You know what
also
I mean?
go
Yes,
bankrupt?
they are.
They
right.
could.
Yes, absolutely.
People could also like regular people who also love weed that you guys would want to see succeed could also go bankrupt because the price for weed is like $100 a
Absolutely.
pound.
Right.
Well, they could also go bankrupt waiting for licensing, though, right? Like while they
Why are
are.
they going bankrupt waiting for license?
I mean, well, because they're supposed to be just waiting, sitting on their hands.
I mean, they're supposed to be making money to pay their rent.
Right.
Like no one's
Yeah,
telling
yeah.
people. And this is also something I get frustrated with because I literally got an email about this the other day. Like I spent millions building a dispensary. Where's my license? No one told you to do that. Stop doing that. We're going to issue because we're starting out again. Like as I said at the beginning, 1,000 licenses are about to go out.
Mhm.
No state has ever started with 1,000 licenses. We're creating a shitload of opportunity for people and a very accessible application that takes a couple hours to fill out. And for social equity, $500. So get the license first, brother. You know, right? Like,
Definitely that, yes.
We don't want people risking everything for the chance at one of these licenses. Like it's not that. It's not what you think it is. It's we try to create it as fair as possible. I think lotteries are the fairest way to distribute cannabis licenses. The second you get into scoring and evaluating applications, it's just consultants. Consultants just win licenses. That's what they do for a living. And I'm tired of that industry. I think it's only advantaged people with money. So,
Speaking of the amount of money that it costs to apply for a license, you spoke to that briefly. If somebody applies and is not considered, they then have to pay to reapply, correct?
yeah. And
What's the deal with that? Why would you?
yeah,
Why?
it's not intuitive to understand why there's application fees generally.
Yeah.
So in order to receive applications, we have to have staff that review the applications. Like all that paperwork that comes in has to be reviewed by a human being getting
Right, of
salary.
course. Yeah.
We don't know how many applications we're going to get, so we can't be pre-funded for this work. We can't like say like we need this much money because we're going to get this many. We have no idea what the work's going to look like. The fees pay for the review. They pay for the background checks. They pay for the enforcement review. They pay for the TPI checks, just the paperwork moving from one side to the other. That costs millions of dollars in salaries and overhead and all this other stuff. And that we can't just tell the taxpayers like, hey, give us a blank check and we'll see how much this costs and you could pay us next year. We have to charge for that. Like it literally is just to process paperwork. DMV stuff, like they're all kind of self-funded that way.
I mean, it's a pretty high invoice for paperwork.
You know how much paper people send? I mean, like it's
damn.
so in one application. All right, let's just talk about this. In one application, I have 2 full-time staff reviewing C paperwork. Licensing has 3 people. These people all paying salaries, getting health care, their
Right.
families on health insurance.
Right.
They're reviewing the C certificate and they review it. They check off the boxes. Department of Labor is involved. Their staff is also helping review this stuff. It has to be, and there's lawyers watching all of this happen,
Right.
taking notes. Like it has to be. So that just process alone, that's $1 million in salary right there. Just doing that. And people are like, oh, that's wasteful. Like there are processes like this for reasons, very good reasons. New York State used to be a very corrupt state.
Used to be.
Hey, it did. To New York's credit, like it's come a long way in the last 10, 20 years. When we used to have like state assemblymen going to federal prison for corruption, for taking bribes and stuff like almost every other year. And so there's all these systems in place to ensure that it's a credible process that people can trust, and the fees pay for that.
I'm still mad about my application fee though. You can't. I'm sorry.
It is like just enough money to be like, yo.
For real.
It's like just enough money to be like, that kind of hurt a little
Yeah,
bit.
$1,000 is meaningful to a lot of people, definitely. What is the expected ETA for the OCM getting through the list for review, and when do you expect the first micro licensees will have lights on?
Lights on, man. That's on them. And I know we're going to issue our first licenses at the January board meeting. And every month, the way we structure this review process is that like our team, our office is constantly every day reviewing applications, sending out deficiencies, coordinating with licensees to complete their deficiencies. And then once they're complete, we put them in a pile to go to the board to vote on at the next board meeting. And so, the rate at which, those are getting completed, the deficiencies are getting filled, is the rate that we issue them to the board. Whatever's ready a week in advance of the board meeting goes to them for review, and then it's there. And so we don't know yet what that rate looks like. We just started this work a few weeks ago. A lot of it is on the licensees themselves or applicants to respond to the deficiencies, like, get your fingerprints, like you didn't send this, address for your CDI paperwork. You know what I mean? Like if it takes them a long time to get it, everyone's got 30 days. The law states that. So it could be months before we get through all these applications. That's a good thing. I mean, like, I will also say that, there are people who are worried about, I'm number 500. I don't know if I'm going to get one. When we review an application, there are a lot of factors that go into like potentially removing that applicant from the review process. If they don't meet that 30 days, they didn't fill out the paperwork, they didn't pass an enforcement thing, they apply for retail license in an opt-out community or too near a school,
Sure.
all that stuff, we keep going down the list. And so, we're going to release a lot of this when we're done with the review process so people can see, what was the rate of people not actually getting the license? What was the rate of people failing for this reason? Was social equity licensees, were they failing to get their paperwork at higher rates than non-social equity? Like, we're going to have an analysis of all that stuff because we got to get better at it over time. We want to get faster. Yeah. It's a slog. You guys sent us a lot of paperwork.
Yeah. I mean, I want licensing online like a year and a half ago. I'm saying. You can't fix that, obviously.
Put your name in, you pay like $25, and they just give you a license, and that's Oklahoma, baby.
That'd be great.
Oklahoma.
All right, last one is, does anyone after the 110 micros on the queue so like, let me back up. There's currently a list that exists that has the 110 micros that are potentially going to be the first 110 will be approved on the current list of people who are applying for the
first
full
110
license.
Will be reviewed.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. And this is a list of people who applied for full micro licenses, which is to say that people who have an actual location secured.
Yeah.
Okay. So, does anybody after those 110?
Yeah,
I mean, chance, right?
Well, so yeah, for everyone else, I mean, especially the people that are higher up, closer to that 110 number, like, you have to imagine that some of these folks may not have a proper lease,
right?
Or may have been a legal shop. That guy has an enforcement flag, and so, or maybe they are unable to find certain paperwork or whatever. It will go beyond the first 110 businesses probably on that list.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, everyone else who's beyond that, I believe there's like 800 micro applicants on that list, so 700 potentially not being reviewed. I think it'll probably be more like 650 not being reviewed. They'll have to apply again. But this is the thing, like, I know a lot of people are dead set on like being the first to apply and getting in first. I was talking to Stephen Fan last week at the opening in Orange County, and he didn't apply, and he's waiting to see what happens. If you've got a good business idea, if you grow great weed, like, theoretically, anytime's a good time for you to get in. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're going to have so many other rounds of issuing these licenses. And a lot of that is going to be informed by what happens after this first round. How many of the retail licenses we gave out actually ever opened? Because that'll inform how many retail licenses we give out in the next round. I mean, we've got to double that. How many micros ever got operational? Are the micros even profitable? Like, do we want to give out more of these, or do we want to change the regs to make them a little bit, so there has to be some tinkering before we start like issuing thousands more, but they're coming.
Sure.
So, and you said, one of the keywords that I heard you say is enforcement flags. Like, what exactly, so does that mean if somebody that was operating, say in the past that was on the card list that didn't shut down their shop and they got a ticket, that means they're no longer qualified?
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
I mean, we tried to warn as many people as possible over the last 2 years that, like, if you get these letters from our office and you don't shut down, like, we have the company behind the store, we have the location, we have the owners, we have a lot of information tying that person to that operation. If we see if those addresses, if those names come into applying for a retail license now, like, you've already showed us that you don't know how to act compliantly. You've already, I'm serious, like, because if there were a lot of illegal shops, we came to them and said, like, if you keep doing this, we gave them a letter, the enforcement people showed up, if you keep doing this, you will not be eligible for license. And they're like, bet, shut down. I'm not even making money anyway. And so they shut them down, and they waited to apply, and they applied. But if you defied that order to stop selling in a storefront, again, like, there was no one going into delivery services and telling people to stop deliver. Where it's like, if you're doing a storefront in a community where the residents are complaining to us and their local electeds and there's a school, like, it's just not going to work.
So you would have had to get a citation, or you would have had, it wasn't like
you would have had to get the warning and then respond to the warning by, like, continuing to do what you were doing.
Right. Because see, my only concern with that is that, like, it's almost at the same time I feel like you might push people back from being so transparent. You know what I mean? It's almost like a catch-22. It's like you want to empower these people, but at the same time,
I don't want to empower those people. I not necessarily, not with legal licenses. And this is important to understand. Like, there are people who waited, people in the legacy community, who shut down their lounges and their whatever, and who waited for the opportunity for decades. And so what do we tell them when we say, like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? Like, it's just and then also people who are just New York residents who love weed and have been waiting to do this legally for a long time. They're still worthy of this opportunity, and they didn't cut corners. Like, we have to go face them after this.
I guess, where does the timeline of cutting corners get caught? Because from my understanding, like, everything I've done
after
in the
past
MRTA
is
now considered
after the
cutting
MRTA was
corners.
signed. If the MRTA was signed, and then you know this, like, if
And
this is also how you guys define legacy too. If you started selling the last 3-4 years, like, is that what you guys would consider legacy? Were they going through it? Were they going through stop and frisk in the city? A lot of people came to New York with the intention of selling in these smoke shops, in these gift shops, like they do in DC. A lot of them are like franchise, unregulated, operators who open up everywhere.
From a perspective of mine, of somebody that sells or where somebody that's been in that industry, is like, that's what legal industry looks like to me. Is like that y'all legalized it, and now it's like, boom. I've heard from so many OG people, like, now I can't sell my shit. Like, now I can't, you know what I mean? So it's like, I guess but how do you, I guess it's tough to distinguish between those two things.
Axel Burnby, our former chief of staff, got hit for this, but he was saying,
wait, I know that dude. Wait, my boy, right?
Oh yeah, Canadian. He got hit for this in the Green Market Report for saying that actually these shops have disrupted, like, a very entrenched legacy market. The delivery operations all went out of business, and they bankrupted a lot of people who were established in the legacy community, and they just, like, put their operations right in front of us so we can actually see them and shut them down. And so he got hit on that a lot. But it's true, these guys disrupted what was already a thriving billion-dollar industry that was probably more rooted in the community previously. Because these guys, Breckenridge Cannabis Club, whatever that place was in Brooklyn, they're not from New York, they're from Colorado. Clearly, they're advertising it publicly. And so, yeah, I mean, this is why we created the CCTM program, because we recognized that there was existing talent out there, people that are from these smaller communities and supplied locally and have these skill sets that deserve an opportunity to enter the legal market. But not people who came over here because the MRTA was signed and they found a legal loophole and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's different.
It's just so hard because at the same time, there's that young dude in the city that's got to feed his family. That's like going to do what he's got to do, And
probably the toughest thing I had was at that Brownsville community meeting. There was this young man who was showing me pictures on his phone of his illegal shop. And he's like,
Oh, don't tell me you called him in, Damian.
What?
Don't tell. Okay.
hey,
Oh.
come on, y'all.
Yeah.
He's just begging me to send compliance people to come over and like give him a license. Like, this is my first business. And this kid, young black man in Brownsville, like he built a beautiful shop. It looked great. He had security cameras. He had glass, and he was so proud of it. He's so proud to show me. And I had to tell him, like, that's just not how it works, man. It's very unfortunate, but this is not how it works. And a lot of that, to your point earlier, that is a failure of government. That kid was never given the tools and the understanding to even like understand what bureaucratic capitalism looks like, waiting for a license and going to advocate for yourself at like a community board. All these tools that bigger business owners understand, that kid was not given the opportunity to figure out. And so he did what he knew how to do. He had a buddy probably who had, could give him a deal on a lease in Brownsville, and he built out this shop probably by himself with cousins, and he's it's
that's the culture, bro. Like though, like
absolutely,
him
it's the
doing
hustle
that,
culture.
and he's probably gonna end up in fucking prison or something.
And I hope
I
hope he applied. I hope he applied.
He did too.
Yeah. And I hope he never got shut down. I don't know. There's a lot of these things that are like also out of our control. The law is the law. And that is just, I know no one in legacy cannabis wants to hear that, but the law is the law. People who abide by the law, generally have a poor outlook on people who don't. And there are still a lot of people in New York State who don't think we should have ever legalized weed. That's at least 40% of the population.
Well, this on the flip side of that, though, right, is this exact concept of there being laws that are unrealistic or stupid or unequitable. And there's stuff there where, like, you're talking about somebody who's obviously trying to just do something right. They're trying to do their best, and they're working within a system that has failed them.
Yeah.
And so how do you, I don't know how you fix that equitably, right? Like, I don't know how you navigate that situation.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, and this is something I'll be very clear about, the MRTA is not a one-stop shop for fixing a lot of these inequities that have existed in New York City and the state for decades. They may not even be, even if that kid did get a license, it may not be a pathway to anything financially helpful to him.
Right.
All this is true. I think that we still owe it to ourselves to also build something better than what we have right now. Like, this is what blows my mind, is that some people will legalize cannabis and be like, and look around this country, see wealth inequality, racial inequality, see George Floyd, stories like that. And you know what we should do? Let's give the first licenses to publicly traded companies. Like, it's just like,
Definitely not.
The jump.
I don't hear anybody saying that. That's only on Twitter and shit. That's only from maniacs.
There are a lot of people who are not seeing cannabis opportunity to unwind some of that wealth inequality, to undo some of that racial injustice, not be a fix, but at least improve the conditions, the material conditions of how people are living in this country. We all who love cannabis know that cannabis has made our lives a lot better. I can't think of
made this interview better even.
I wouldn't know.
No.
But yeah, I just think cannabis is such an amazing plant. I've loved consuming it my whole life. I've loved the people I've met through cannabis, like the homies who smoked growing up. Like, we're always just some of the most interesting people in the world. And yeah, I just think it's such a more beautiful experience when you're like buying cannabis to buy it, in a supply chain that is, promoting small businesses, that is helping your community grow, that is reinvesting in marginalized, harmed communities. I think that just the purchasing experience, the pride you would have in buying weed would be so much better. The smoke would be better.
Yeah. So to that end, I expect a huge pivot from the OCM in the near future towards the micro business licenses and all of the incredible high quality New York craft growers
Yeah, hell yeah.
that we see and get to smoke all the time. People who win the New York Growers Cup, people like that. Like, I'd love to see more of that getting celebrated.
We can. I do want to talk about that for a second, because to understand what happens in the OCM, like, there are people who smoke a lot of weed who know what good weed is.
Yeah.
And there are people who, like, they want to be at the forefront of creating a new industry who don't smoke weed.
I'm trying to do both.
The perfect melding is people who do both, which is a lot of people in our office. But, I remember having a conversation with Axel. I had the night before smoked Godmother's stuff. And I was like, yo, Axel, out of body experience, brother. It's like 7-Eleven wine and like the best Merlot you've ever had.
Right.
And he's like, what? The difference, he's like, the difference is that wine. It's that wine, man.
Right.
And so, that's all you have to say to someone like him and other policymakers to be like, oh, So then we really need to create regulations that will create those craft outcomes we need,
Right.
so the consumers can come to our shelves to access the stuff that they already, you know what I mean? Like, but you have to smoke the weed to know that.
Definitely.
If you just like, oh yeah, you get a license, grow some weed, like, and then everything's mid, and you're wondering why 50% of your market is still like unregulated.
Sounds like New York's right now.
Hey, it's our first year. No, we've captured like 5% of the unregulated market.
Right.
But this year it'll be 30. The year after that will be 40. Then it'll be 60. And this is my point, I think, to a lot of people in the legacy community, is like, yo, this is happening. And you can either be a part of it, you can be cynical and reject it and just keep doing your thing. But it is going to overwhelm you eventually. It could be years. It could be prohibition after alcohol. It was like 10, 20 years before it was actually like a fully regulated market. There was moonshiners everywhere. When I grew weed in South Carolina, or grew hemp in South Carolina, cannot grow THC in South Carolina. I heard a lot of stories about North Carolina moonshiners and how they went from doing moonshine, and you could see the smokestacks coming off the mountains, and so the police would just follow the smokestacks and lock them all up. So then they started growing weed because you couldn't see this. There was no smokestacks. Then Ronald Reagan gave police departments helicopters so they could fly over and see the weed, and so they started growing weed in basements. Like, it's just like. This is a new frontier now, like what's happening now. Like, the federal government is considering, rescheduling or descheduling, whatever. Legalization nationally is coming. Like, they're going to be selling weed they're going to have like cafes. They're going to be selling weed at the Madison Square Garden eventually. Like, see the bigger picture here, fellas. Like,
I want us to be there first. We got to get there first.
Let's
go.
They got some sort of like smokers lounge at Madison Square Garden or something.
Saying.
It's just funny though, but like because you just said right before, you like, if we're gonna take 20%, then we're gonna take 30%, then we're gonna take, and it's so funny for like being in this position, because genuinely a part of me, like, it gets more mad as you say those higher numbers, but then at the same time, I don't know, like, I want to be a part of helping something that's like bigger. I don't know.
So like, I'm not gonna.
And that's the sorry, not to interrupt you, but that's like a perspective of like legacy people that the regulators need to understand. You know what I mean,
bro? Meeting you guys and talking to legacy folks too, I can't lie that sometimes in my head I'm like, is what we're doing the best thing for this plant? Is a regulated market actually going to lead to better outcomes for cannabis generally and people who consume it? Like, what we're doing hasn't been. It's new. It hasn't been done before. It's impossible to accurately predict what's exactly going to happen. Capitalism in this country has a way of ruining everything beautiful. Ruined hip hop, ruins like millennials' futures. Like, it just ruins. It just eats. It just consumes, and it commoditizes, and it just makes it terrible. And there's elements to it that just like. I can see it even like kind of fetishizing legacy culture and then like capitalizing off of it and then selling it back to the people who created it. And it just like, you can see that all these are possible outcomes, but it's happening regardless. And so it behooves a lot of people who care about it to push it that way if you want it to go that way. Get more involved and tell your elected leaders who you are. And I say that's hard for legacy people to do. Be like, hey, I sold weed illegally. Listen to me. You know what I mean? Like, because no one ever has.
Right. You can start a podcast though. Also, you can do any number.
What you guys are doing right now is important. What you guys are doing right now is important. When I first met you, I was encouraging you to talk to Kolektor, to organize upstate and New York City legacy, so you guys had stronger community backing. You had more power. You had more leverage. Because that's what the hemp farmers had. Like, there's a playbook here. To understand how to accomplish things in a state, and it is through organizing. It is through building community with people.
Then I am becoming aware of that, especially if you're seeing, Candy and them influence. It really is, but then you also have to have like really quickly, it's like you have to have that opportunity to do that. If it wasn't for me already having been successful with what I was doing to some degree, or like owning a house, like that shit, there's no way like to get to the point I am now, I'm almost broke.
Yeah.
So somebody else, my version of myself 5 years ago, couldn't have done that.
Yeah, but you're growing, right?
Right,
You're getting better at it.
Yeah.
And as people who are folks like you who are like potentially, looking to transition to the legal market, like, you have a huge opportunity here to be an example to a lot of young men and women who are wondering what they should do. And also a voice of like hold the OCM accountable, hold your elected leaders accountable. If they're doing something that isn't good that you think for the plant, like figure out how to lobby them to not do that. You know what I mean? Like, don't let them do things to you.
Oh, we're gonna lead the example. That's the one
I
thing.
shouldn't have said all that.
Yeah.
Fucking making my job harder.
Fuck the OCM. No.
Bro, no one else in this country is licensed. I literally went to a grand opening at a card dispensary, and the owner of the dispensary, as we're walking away, is like, "Yo, we're the government." Because we're licensing people who were harmed by the government.
Hey,
they got some beef.
That's what's
Right.
crazy.
They're like, "Thank you," but
Yeah, right,
like, you know
right.
what I mean? Like, at the same time, it's cool.
It's historical.
All right, so let's wrap it up with some rapid fire questions. You
I'll
got some
be
rapid fire
honest, I
questions?
literally only have 2 because I was too baked last
No.
night. And I was like, yeah, right. I only could come up with ones that weren't good. But all right. I only have 2. So, and these are...
back like that.
Yeah, because I got
Put my reading glasses.
Yeah, but it's far away. Oh, so the first one is it true that you once smoked so much CBD that you got really, really sleepy? Is that true?
I hate that question.
Okay, next one.
You were really baked.
Yeah.
You
Wait
get
till the
like-
next one. Okay, we're gonna cut all of these too, by the way. No, all right. Are we friends, best friends, or worst enemies?
Oh my god.
Yeah, that's the only 2 I have.
You can put frenemies on the
No,
list?
yeah,
we got a new term for where we're headed. Colleagues.
Colleague.
Ooh.
Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
okay.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, put it here.
Fingers
Yo.
Wow.
That's
All right.
just crazy.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you very much for being
Yeah,
on,
thank you for having me, guys.
Damian. And thank you, Dank, always for
Yeah,
being here.
no, I appreciate it. And if I can say one more thing too, and I said it online too, but it's like just you leading the example. Like I've said it a million times. I don't know about everybody in the OCM, but like I've seen you firsthand, and you like back up the things you talk or engage with everybody, and I got a lot of respect for that. Wherever the future goes, I don't know, but hopefully we can keep that same shit up and like
Yeah.
try to-
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate
hell
it.
yeah.
And thank you for having me. This is an
Please.
important podcast to host. I mean, I think that you guys are doing something important for the industry. People need to be watching what's happening right now and paying attention and getting involved. And this is exactly how you do it. So
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for watching. Thank you to the Relic Room for having us. Thank you to Offscreen, Gasroots, Fabian from Jackson Heights, and Sensei and Kolektor, of course. Oh, and David, please. Shout out David, please. That's it. We'll see you guys next episode. Peace.
Peace.
This episode of I Smoke New York was recorded at the Relic Room in beautiful Midtown Manhattan, New York City. It was recorded, edited, and produced by Gasroots. Keep in touch with I Smoke New York directly on Instagram at I Smoke New York.